face was pressed right against my bedroom window glass. Pale, I blinked in disbelief, hoping it was a nightmare. But it was real. Someone was outside my window at 2 a.m. My heart seized up, and I scrambled backwards off the bed. Just minutes earlier, I'd been scrolling on my phone under the covers in the dark. Home alone for the weekend, I was enjoying the quiet. Then I felt that prickling sensation of being watched. I glanced up, and that's when I saw him, a gaunt figure. His breath fogged a small circle on my window. For a moment I was frozen, and he didn't move either. My mind whirled with confusion and terror. Was this a prank, or the start of a home invasion? I barely managed to crawl to the far corner of my room, never taking my eyes off that silhouette. My phone was still on the bed. I needed to call 911. But if I moved to grab it, would that prompt him to try coming in? The window was closed and latched, but a determined person could smash it easily. Summoning courage, I took my eyes off the figure for 1 second to flick on my bedside lamp. Light flooded the room. In that instant, I heard a scuffling sound. He'd dropped out of sight. Perhaps the sudden light startled him. I lunged for my phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. Whispering into the phone, I told the operator someone was trying to break into my house. I could barely get the words out between panicked breaths. The dispatcher urged me to stay calm and on the line. Police were on their way. I crept toward the window on my knees. Outside, the darkness was almost total, except for faint moonlight on the lawn. Then, a flash of movement. He was running across the yard. My stomach dropped. The back door, did I lock it? I couldn't remember. As quietly as possible, I slipped out of my room and tiptoed down the hall. Phone clutched to my ear. The dispatcher stayed on the line, updating me that officers were only minutes away. Every floorboard creak under my feet sounded as loud as a gunshot. I reached the kitchen at the rear. The door was closed, but was it locked? Suddenly, the handle rattled vigorously. A jolt of adrenaline shot through me. He was there, on the other side of that door, testing it. The door rattled again, harder, then thud. He threw his weight against it. I let out a cry, despite trying not to. In a frenzy, I frantically wedged a chair under the knob and threw my weight against the door. The dispatcher heard the commotion and told me to hide. Another heavy slam nearly knocked me off balance. The wood groaned but held. I was sobbing and cried to the 911 operator. He's trying to break in. She said the police were almost there. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the assault on the door stopped. I listened, shaking, to the silence. The only sounds were my own panting and the dispatcher's distant voice on my phone. I didn't dare move yet, in case he was looking for another way in. After what felt like an eternity, I heard sirens in the distance. Blue and red lights soon danced through my front windows. Relief flooded me. I finally stepped away from the door, hands clammy on the phone. By the time the police knocked and announced themselves, the intruder had fled. The officers searched around the house and yard. They found clear boot prints below my bedroom window and along the back porch, leading off into the woods. The back door handle was scratched, and the frame slightly splintered. The officers guessed he bolted when he heard the sirens. They promised extra patrols that night, and even said I was brave to have held that door shut. I was left shaken, but safe. I didn't sleep at all for the rest of that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that pale face against my window and heard the rattling door. One moment he was at my window, the next at my door. That image is burned into my mind. Even now I flinch at the slightest shadow by my window. Whoever that man was, I hope I never see him again. I know I'll never forget that terrible face watching me from the darkness. A pounding on the front door jolted me awake on the living room couch. It was just past midnight, and someone was outside, hitting the door with frenzied force. The whole house trembled with each blow. I leaped to my feet, heart racing. Who would knock like that at this hour? My first thought was maybe a neighbor in trouble, but there were no cries for help. Keeping a safe distance, I approached the door quietly, socked feet making no sound on the hardwood. My house doesn't have a peephole, so I inched toward the front window and nudged the curtain aside a sliver. The porch light was off, but the street lamp cast a dim glow. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a baseball cap stood on my porch, one hand raised to pound again. As I watched, he spoke in a low, rough voice. "I know you're in there. Open up." It wasn't a plea. It was a command, and it made my skin crawl. Every instinct told me not to open the door. Swallowing hard, I mustered a shout. "Who are you? What do you want?" My voice shook despite my effort to sound strong. Instead, he slammed his hand against the door again, making the frame shudder. The doorknob jiggled. He was trying to force his way in. I threw my weight against the door. "I'm calling the police," I shouted, trying to sound brave though my voice cracked. To my surprise, he responded with a growl. "No, open the door, now." His confidence sent a chill through me. My cell phone was in the kitchen, charging. I'd have to leave the door to get it. Heart hammering, I decided to risk it. I dashed to the kitchen and grabbed my phone. I managed to dial 911, but before I could speak, a thunderous crack of splintering wood. He was kicking in the door. I sprinted back and flung myself against the door again. "Leave me alone. The police are coming," I screamed at the top of my lungs. I could hear the dispatcher faintly on the phone in my hand. But before I could speak to her, another sound froze me, a scraping at the back door. In that moment, it clicked. There were two of them, one at the front to distract me, while another tried the back. A surge of dread washed over me as I remembered I might have left the kitchen door unlocked. Abandoning the front, I sprinted to the kitchen, just as I saw the back doorknob turning. A dark figure was pushing inside. With a shriek, I body slammed the door, crushing the intruder's arm. He yelped in pain and withdrew, cursing loudly on the other side. A split second later, a tremendous bang came from the front entry. The front door had finally been kicked in. I was trapped between two attackers. Now, one at the shattered front entrance, the other at the barricaded back door. I bolted toward the hallway, desperately seeking an escape or a place to hide. Perhaps the bathroom. As I passed the foyer, I glimpsed the first man stepping through the ruined front door. A long knife glinted in his hand. My phone, still connected to 911, was now blaring. The intruder heard it. He snapped to his partner. "Hurry up. We gotta go." I stayed hidden, hearing the back door rattle as the second man kept trying to force his way in. The first intruder, knife in hand, stalked further into my living room searching for me. My heart thundered as I pressed myself into a dark corner. Then, outside, sirens blared and lights flashed. The intruders clearly heard it. The knife wielder cursed and bolted out the front door. "Run," to the other. Seconds later, the police arrived, but the men were already gone into the night. My front door was in splinters. Officers swept the house and found no one. They did find a crowbar tossed in my backyard and muddy boot prints at both the front and back doors. Still shaking, I gave the police what descriptions I could. The first man was tall, heavy-set, wearing a baseball cap and a brown jacket. I barely saw the second, just his hand and boot when I slammed the door on him. The officers confirmed it was a planned home invasion and said my quick 911 call likely scared them off before they could do worse. I was unbelievably lucky. I woke up, realized what was happening. I learned that night just how far some people will go to get inside a home. The echo of that pounding on my door still haunts me, and I haven't fallen asleep on the couch since. Every night now, I triple-check every door and lock is secure. My car veered sharply as the tire exploded. With a thunderous pop, I fought the steering wheel to regain control, heart pounding. The car thumped and skidded onto the gravel shoulder. As I came to a halt, only one thought filled my mind. This can't be happening. In my rearview mirror, I saw headlights approaching, slowing as they neared. A cold wave of dread washed over me. I recognized that old pickup truck. I had seen it 10 minutes earlier at the isolated gas station where I'd stopped for fuel. I was on a solo road trip, driving through remote stretches well past midnight. The last gas station had been a lonely, dimly lit stop. An older man in overalls by a rusty pickup truck had watched me intently. I filled my tank. His unblinking stare sent a chill up my spine. I left quickly, uneasy dot. Now, that same truck. Every hair on my neck stood up. Maybe he's just stopping to help. I tried to reassure myself, even as my instincts screamed that the flat tire so soon after leaving that station. I slammed my doors locked and fumbled for the pepper spray in my glove box. My hands trembled. A glance at my phone showed no signal and a nearly dead battery. A tap at my driver's side window nearly made me jump out of my skin. He was already there, the same gaunt, weathered face, now inches from my glass. He gave a thin, unfriendly smile and gestured for me to roll down the window. I shouted through the glass, "I'm fine. I don't need help." My voice was higher pitched than I'd hoped. He cupped a hand to his ear like he couldn't hear me, then gestured more emphatically for me to open up. My heart hammered against my ribs. I shook my head hard and held up my phone to show him. In reality, I hadn't reached anyone, but he didn't know that his smile vanished. He smacked the top of my car and yelled, "Open the door, girl. You've got a flat. You need help." It was no longer a friendly offer. It was almost a command. I felt like a trapped animal. The engine was still running. Maybe I could drive on the rim. My eyes flicked to the ignition and back to the figure outside. Gritting my teeth, I decided to make a run for it. I threw the car into drive. He realized what I was doing and stepped in front of my hood to block me. I floored the gas. The car groaned and lurched forward on the flat tire with a hideous grinding noise. He jumped back, swearing, as the rims screeched on the pavement. My car wobbled up to maybe 30 miles per hour, the flat tire thumping. In my mirror, I saw him sprint to his pickup. He was giving chase. The empty highways stretched ahead darkly. I prayed I could reach some lights or a town before my car fell apart. My knuckles were white on the wheel as the thump 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 of the flat echoed. His headlights loomed in my mirror. Soon the pickup was beside me. I glanced over. He was glaring, one hand on the wheel, the other reaching for something. I didn't want to find out. He swerved into me, trying to run me off the road. My car lurched onto the shoulder. I screamed, wrestling the wheel and barely kept from spinning out. Then, up ahead, I saw lights. A glowing neon sign at a truck stop diner by an intersection. I have never been so relieved. I pressed the gas harder. The truck fell back. He saw it too. I careened into the diner's parking lot. The pickup sped past on the highway. not daring to follow me into a populated area. Shaking all over, I parked by the entrance. 2 truckers outside saw my smoking tire and my panic. I blurted out that someone had chased me and tried to run me off the road. They stayed with me as I called the police. When state troopers arrived, I explained everything. They found a deliberate slash in my tire, not normal blowout. Likely done back at that gas station. One trooper nodded. It was a known tactic. A predator sabotages a car, then follows until the victim's car becomes disabled. I was incredibly lucky. I reached that diner. A few miles earlier, alone on the dark road, it could have ended differently. I still break into a sweat thinking of his face at my window and how he tried to ram me off the road. Now I avoid late-night drives and lonely gas stops. That night, I learned that a stranger offering help might actually be laying a trap. I barely escaped on that empty highway. I awoke to the sound of footsteps outside my tent, deliberate. My heart froze as I held my breath. It was past midnight, at a silent forest campground. I had hiked to this remote lake site earlier that day. The night was peaceful until those footsteps shattered the silence. I checked my phone. No signal. The nearest ranger station was 10 miles away. Silently, I reached for the hunting knife in my sleeping bag. My only defense aside from a can of bear spray and the dying campfire embers outside. The footsteps stopped right behind my tent. Through the moonlit fabric, I saw the shadow of legs just inches away. I bit my lip hard to stifle a whimper. Minutes crawled by with a person just standing there. I couldn't hear a breath over my own heartbeat. I clicked off the safety on my bear spray, bracing for the worst. A slow scrape dragged along the tent wall, from back to front. Like a hand, my mind raced. Should I yell, stay quiet, or run? Before I could act, a low whistle broke the silence. Not a tune, just one long, eerie note. Right outside, the tent fabric quivered as if touched. That was enough. Clutching my knife and pepper spray, as forcefully as I could manage. No answer. The whistling stopped. The forest fell silent again. I stayed frozen, muscles locked. I didn't dare go out. Could it be a lost hiker or ranger? Why sneak around and not answer? It felt malicious. After a few more minutes, I carefully unzipped a tiny opening and peered out. The weak orange glow of the campfire embers lit the clearing. I saw no movement, no figure. If someone was still there, they were hiding. I knew I needed more light. Keeping my knife ready, I reached out and poked the fire with a stick. The flames brightened, casting flickering light around the campsite. "Hello, you're scaring me." "I have a weapon," I yelled, bluffing strength. Then a figure flickered between 2 trees at the edge of the light. My heart leapt into my throat. It was a person tall and lanky, slipping behind a tree before I could see a face. Panic set in. I had to get out. I hastily shoved my phone, keys, and wallet into my backpack with one hand. As I zipped the pack, a hushed chuckle came from the darkness to my left. Adrenaline surged. I slung on my pack, grabbed my flashlight, and aimed it. The beam caught the edge of a tree, and for a split second, it vanished an instant later. They were toying with me. "Leave me alone. I'm calling the police." I shouted, knowing I had no signal. My voice echoed back from the trees. I couldn't wait. I gripped my pepper spray and prepared to bolt for my car, 2 miles away. A long, dark run, but better than staying. I yanked open the tent and burst out into the night. Flashlight in front, knife raised. I have expected to be grabbed immediately, but no one was there. The forest looked empty, but I knew he was watching, leaving everything behind. I ran down the dark trail. My flashlight beam danced wildly. Every snap of a twig and rustle of leaves made me jump. I was breathing hard, forcing myself to run faster. A few minutes into the run, I heard heavy footsteps behind me. I didn't dare look back. The steps quickened, crunching leaves and snapping branches. They were closing in. Panicking, I spun around with flashlight and spray ready. Nothing. The path was empty. The footsteps stopped. Only my flashlight beam and the heavy quiet of the woods. I was shaking violently. I didn't wait any longer. I turned and ran as fast as my shaking legs allowed. After what felt like endless darkness, my flashlight finally reflected off the metal of my car. I nearly sobbed with relief. I burst from the trees and dove into my car, keys in hand. I locked the doors and fumbled the key into the ignition. As the engine roared to life, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw that tall figure step out of the trail, lit red by my taillights. He had followed me the whole way. I slammed the car into drive and sped off, gravel flying. In my mirror, the figure faded into darkness. I didn't stop until I reached a ranger station miles away. Rangers later found my tent slashed open and gear thrown about. They suspected a drifter living in the woods. There had been other reports of similar frightening encounters around that area. I was lucky I woke up and escaped unharmed. Now I only camp where others are nearby. I still hear those footsteps in my nightmares, and I see that pale, half-hidden face. Being alone in the dark and knowing someone was lurking just outside my tent is a horror. A metallic scraping outside my fourth-floor bedroom window woke me around 2 a.m. Held my breath and heard it again, the clank of the metal fire escape ladder being jostled. My heart pounded. I live alone, and my bedroom window opens. No one should be on it at this hour. I slipped out of bed and crept to the window. Through a gap in the blinds, I saw a figure crouched on the fire escape landing outside. It was a man, moving slowly, but the rusty metal had betrayed him. I watched in mute terror as he pressed up on my window. Thank God it was latched. When it didn't budge, he pulled a tool from his pocket and wedged it under the frame. I had to act before he got inside. My phone was on the nightstand. I quietly grabbed it and dialed 911. In the faintest whisper, I told the dispatcher someone was breaking in through my fire escape. As I spoke, a heavy thunk made me flinch. He jammed a pry bar under the window and was levering it up. Wood cracked loudly as the frame started to splinter. Panicking, I grabbed the heavy ceramic lamp from my nightstand. I edged back to the window. His face was now partly visible, pressed against the glass. As he strained, greasy, dark hair under a cap, eyes narrowed with effort. Fear and fury flooded me at the sight of him. In my ear, the dispatcher said officers were on the way and to hide. Instead, I left the line open and suddenly flicked on the bedroom light. The man froze as the room lit up, and our eyes met through the window. He hadn't realized I was right there. Seizing the moment, I bellowed, "Get away from my window!" I called the police. For a split second, he just glared at me. Then his face twisted in rage. He rammed the pry bar hard, cracking the frame and popping the window open an inch. I screamed in a mix of rage and fear and swung the lamp at the window. It hit the glass with a dull thud, not enough to break it, but it made him recoil. He lost balance and grabbed the railing to steady himself. At that moment, Sirens blared down the street and blue lights came into view. He heard it. I watched him drop the last few rungs into the alley and disappear. Less than a minute later, police were at my door, but he was long gone. Officers searched the alley and nearby streets, but found no one. They did collect the pry bar. He left and took fingerprints from my window frame. I gave a shaky description: medium build, dark jacket, baseball cap. I hadn't seen much of his face in the dark. One officer mentioned something chilling. A week earlier, a man had broken in through a fire escape on the next block. The resident woke to find an intruder in her living room. He fled when she screamed. They thought it might be the same guy. I was incredibly lucky to wake up. I've since reinforced my windows and even added barriers to the fire escape ladder. Still, every creak at night sends my heart racing. I keep picturing that figure crouched on my fire escape, and I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't heard that faint scrape when I did. A heavy thud against the back patio door shook the floor. I had just put the kids. I was babysitting to bed and was cleaning up when it sounded like someone slammed into the glass. I froze, heart in my throat. It was nearly midnight in a quiet suburb, and the parents wouldn't be back for hours. I hoped it was just wind or something, but the big family dog at my feet. Another bang rattled the door, and the dog erupted in barks. Forcing myself forward, I crept toward the kitchen. I flicked on the patio light, and my stomach lurched. A tall man in a dark hoodie stood on the patio, caught in the light. His face was hidden by the hood, and maybe a ski mask. He was panting, and in one gloved hand, he held a crowbar. He had been trying to pry the sliding door, but it was locked. Seeing me, he stepped back in surprise. Then he suddenly raised his tool and smashed it against the glass. I screamed and stumbled back as the glass shuddered. The door held, but a spiderweb crack spread where the crowbar hit. The dog went wild, barking and jumping at the door. Upstairs, the two kids, a 6-year-old girl and 3-year-old boy. My mind raced. I had to protect the kids and call for help. Another massive smash rattled the door. The glass was holding, but about to give. He wasn't letting up. I bolted upstairs with the dog on my heels. The 6-year-old Alice stood sobbing in a doorway, asking what was wrong. I scooped up her little brother and whispered, "We have to hide now." "Okay." As I rushed them into the master bedroom, I heard the glass starting to crack downstairs. I locked the bedroom door and got the kids into the master bathroom. The dog stayed with us, snarling at the door, hands shaking. I dialed 911. Over the kids' whimpers, I whispered our address and that someone was breaking in. The dispatcher said police were on the way. A massive crash echoed. The patio door shattered. The dog bolted out before I could grab him, racing downstairs. I heard him bark furiously, then a horrible yelp. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. The intruder was in the house. Heavy footsteps thudded below, and the dog had gone silent. The kids trembled in my arms, and I struggled to think of a plan. The dispatcher's voice crackled on speaker, asking if I was still there. I barely breathed into the phone. "He's inside." She told me to stay quiet and keep the line open. Outside the bedroom, I heard him stomping through rooms and slamming doors. "Searching," he cursed under his breath. I gripped the bathroom door handle tightly, the only flimsy barrier. Then, faint at first, I heard sirens. They grew louder. The intruder must have heard them too, because his rampage suddenly stopped. I cautiously crept out of the bathroom, leaving the kids in the tub. From the top of the stairs, I saw the front door hanging open. He had bolted. Moments later, 2 police officers rushed in. I nearly collapsed with relief as I called out to them. They found the poor dog hiding under a table, thankfully just kicked aside. not badly hurt. The patio door was in pieces. The intruder had fled empty-handed. As soon as he heard the sirens, I gave a shaky description. Tall, around 6 feet, dark hoodie. The kids clung to me, but we were all unharmed. Officers swept the house to be sure he was gone. One officer said I did the right thing by hiding and calling 911. He mentioned there had been reports of a masked prowler in the area that week. He agreed that the dog and my turning on the lights likely kept the intruder from doing worse. The parents came home to flashing lights and were horrified, but beyond shaken nerves, everyone was safe. I went home once things calmed down, but I couldn't sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the updated figure and heard the glass shattering. I've babysat many times, but after that night, hiding in a bathroom with 2 children while someone broke into the house is a nightmare I won't ever forget. The first time I saw the figure was about a week ago, standing at the far edge of my barnyard in the moonlight. I live on a remote farm. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks, but there was clearly a person tall and lanky standing just beyond the old barn. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it toward them, calling out. In an instant, the figure slipped away into the darkness beyond my property line. All that remained were my goats bleating nervously in their pen. In the following nights, strange things happened. A barn door left open. I constantly felt watched, even in daylight. Late one night, I woke to my dog frantically barking on the front porch. Heart thumping, I peered out the window. The yard was silver with full moonlight. My dog was on the porch, growling toward the barn. I yanked on my boots, grabbed my shotgun, and stepped onto the porch. Whoever's out there, you're trespassing. I shouted into the night, trying to sound authoritative. Silence. Even the crickets were still. Then I heard a soft crunch of grass near the tractor shed. I swung my flashlight that way. For just a second, the beam caught a face with wide eyes before it ducked out of sight. My stomach dropped. That's it. I'm calling the sheriff. I yelled, adrenaline surging. I backed into the house and slammed the door. My hands shook as I dialed the sheriff directly. As I described the situation, my dog suddenly barked and snarled at the back door. A shadow passed by the kitchen window. The person was circling the house. There's someone here right now, I hissed to the dispatcher, who said a patrol was on the way. I dropped the phone on the counter and ran to secure the back door. Someone was trying to get in. I grabbed a cast iron frying pan from the stove and slammed it against the inside of the door. The explosive bang echoed into the night. I heard a startled yelp outside. A minute later, headlights swept down my long dirt driveway. 2 deputies jumped out, and I ran to meet them. Breathless, we searched around the house and property. In the moonlight, we found fresh boot prints in the mud by the back door, and more. Whoever it was had been pacing around, checking for a way in. One deputy followed the footprints off toward the woods, but came back empty-handed. They suspected a drifter looking to steal livestock or equipment. Then a deputy shone his flashlight up in my barn's hayloft and found a crumpled sleeping bag. Someone had been living in my barn, secretly camping just 100 yards from my house. I felt sick. The deputies took the evidence and promised more. They urged me to reinforce all my locks, which I did first thing in the morning. A few days passed quietly, but I barely slept, snapping awake at every noise. One afternoon in the barn, I found fresh cigarette butts. It meant the squatter might have returned. That night, I decided to stay up on watch, armed with a now loaded shotgun and my dog by my side. Sometime around 2 a.m. I saw movement by the barn, a silhouette slipping between the barn and the chicken coop. I phoned the sheriff immediately. As I whispered on the phone, the figure crept from behind the coop toward my house. A surge of anger and fear hit me. I flipped on the new yard floodlights I'd installed. The blinding beams lit up a man in filthy clothes about 20 yards from my porch. He looked up, caught like a deer in headlights. I saw a gaunt face and wild eyes. From the window I shouted, "Stay right there," with my shotgun visible in hand. He didn't stay. He bolted toward the woods again, but this time, the deputies were only a minute away. I stayed on the phone until I saw the sheriff's cruiser racing up. They caught him. The deputies found the man hiding in a ditch. He turned out to be an escapee from a distant psychiatric facility. Knowing this kept me awake for many nights after, haunted by what could have happened. Someone had been lurking right outside my home, even sleeping in my barn and watching me. I now padlock every building and leave the yard lights on all night. Still, whenever I step outside after dark, I glance at that barn, half expecting to see that tall, shadowy figure standing there again, silently watching. If you're still watching, you know these stories weren't just entertainment. They were warnings. So hit subscribe because next time, it might be your story I tell.